live from the new sports betting capital of the world.
You might be from Texas, but I'm from New Jersey.
Benny Ricciardi is here to break down the day's betting board for you.
Let's go, Jerry. Go!
Taking a first look at the day's bets, it's time for the FTN Betting Show.
Welcome to the FTN Bets Cast for Wednesday, August 17th here at FTN Bets and sponsored by our friends over at Sleeper. Sleeper is the fastest growing fantasy platform today with millions of players, and now you can win on Sleeper by playing in their new over-under game too. Super easy to play. So first, in any sport, you're going to choose two or more players that you like and then pick whether they're going to go over or under their listed totals. So for example, it could be something like the number of hits in baseball tonight, maybe the number of runs a guy scores, the number of runs a pitcher allows, or maybe the number of strikeouts that a pitcher gets. And then you're going to choose an amount of money that you want to enter into the contest. If you pick correctly, you can win anywhere from 2 times your money all the way up to 20 times your money if you go 5 out of 5 and get them all correct. But the main reason why I'm excited about the over-under game on Sleeper is that it's the only app where I could join in my buddy's contest and we could all play together. It has a built-in group chat where I can see what you're playing, you can see what I'm playing, and we could all see what the guy who keeps winning day after day is playing. And it's insanely fun when you follow along and everybody is riding out the same things together. So stop what you're doing now and download the Sleeper app, play in their new over-under game, have some fun with your friends, and make a little bit of money in the process. On your mobile phone, you can go to sleeper.com/FTNbets. And if you click through that link, Sleeper will automatically match the first deposit you make up to $100. So again, go down to the description of this podcast. You'll see it there. Sleeper.com/FTNbets. Click that link and you'll be eligible for a $100 match on your first deposit. There are terms and conditions that apply, so see Sleeper's terms of use for those details. Today, we're going to keep rolling on with our NFL team betting previews. We started with the AFC West in the last episode with the Denver Broncos. Now we're going to move on and talk about the team that finished second in the division last year, the Las Vegas Raiders. And I don't know if many people realize that they finished second in a division that includes Kansas City, Denver, and the Los Angeles Chargers. So this Raiders team is a lot better than people think they are. And on top of that, they made a monster splash addition in the offseason by adding Devontae Adams to their team as well. So this is a team that, again, they won 10 games last year. They finished 10-7. They finished second in the division last year. And yet most people aren't expecting them to do much of anything. In fact, they are predicted to come in last in their division. But here's the interesting thing about them projected to come in last in their division. Jeff Ratcliffe still has this Las Vegas Raiders team projected for 8.8 wins. The consensus number out there in the market on the win total number for this Las Vegas Raiders team is 8.5 wins. So yes, they are projected to come in last, but this is a hell of a division. If the worst team in the division is still projected for over 8 wins, and 8.5 is what the books are looking at there. So let's take a look at the actual numbers here. So 8.5, like I said, the consensus number out in the market for the Las Vegas Raiders, win total on the sports books this year. BetMGM has the best price of all the online books. They have this over 8.5 wins at a -110 price. If you're looking to play the under 8.5 wins, the best price you can get on there is on DraftKings at +110. So again, you could basically get what we consider to be a risk-free bet if you're looking here, because you could bet both sides of this and get a break even out of it. You bet $100 on DraftKings at +110. If they go under 8.5 wins, you would win back $110. You bet $110 on MGM, you would get $100 back if they win there. So this is a no rake kind of bet here. Now, again, I'm not saying you bet both sides of this and end up with zero. That's stupid. And you're basically just locking your money up for 6 months. But we love betting into markets where there's no takeout. And that's exactly what this is here. If you can get it at -110 on MGM for the over and +110 on DraftKings for the under, then this is a market where there's no rake involved in it, because you can get the same best price there on 2 different books, which basically means if you were going to pick, if you have a strong lean, whether over or under for the Las Vegas Raiders, this is one of those places you want to be putting your money down, because the numbers that are being offered out there in the market don't have any extra takeout, any extra rake that's been added to it. If you take the best number from the 2 different books here, which is what we're doing. So again, if you like the over, -110 on BetMGM. If you like the under, +110 over on DraftKings. I personally think the number is right where it should be. I mean, again, Jeff has them for 8.8 wins. The number is 8.5. There's probably a slight little edge there to the over. But again, it's at minus 110. So, you would need that edge to be at even money if you were going to be playing it. Really, I think this is the perfect number. I'm staying away from the win total number here for the Raiders. But I do think it's interesting that even though they're projected to come in last in their division, they're still projected to basically be a 500 team this year, or maybe even a little above. So let's talk about the next number here. Will the Raiders make the playoffs? So again, we talk about this quite often when we do this. Last year, the number that guaranteed you a playoff berth was 10 wins. If you got 10 wins, you were automatically in the playoffs. 9 wins is where a couple teams made it, a couple teams didn't, and it really came down to tiebreakers, who beat who, things like that. So you need to see them get to 10 wins in order to guarantee themselves a playoff berth. At 9, they still have a chance. So the yes at plus 130 on BetMGM is probably the better way to play that. I would rather play the yes at plus 130 on MGM than the minus 110 that MGM has for them to get over 8.5 wins. Could they end up with 9 wins and still not make the playoffs? Yeah. Based on last year, which was the first year we had with 17 games, it's a 50-50 chance, right? We had half the teams with 9 wins made it, half the teams with 9 wins got knocked out. So, it is what it is there. But again, if you're going to play something here, I'd rather just play them yes to make the playoffs at plus 130 rather than taking the over 8.5 wins at minus 110. Yes, there is a chance they get to 9 wins and you lose, but if they get to 10, they're going to get in the playoffs anyway, and I'd rather have that plus 130 payout there. So I like the yes. Will they make the playoffs? Plus 130. If you want to play no, they will not make the playoffs. Minus 145 on DraftKings, or minus 195. I'm sorry, minus 195 on DraftKings is the best number that you can get out there. But again, if you don't think they're going to make the playoffs, I would much rather just take the under 8.5 wins at plus 110 over on DraftKings. So that's the way I'm looking to play it. If you're a Raiders fan and you think they can get over 8.5 wins, I think they have a good chance to make the playoffs. Play yes on MGM plus 130 for them to make the playoffs. If you're a Raiders hater and you don't think they're going to get over 8.5 wins, rather than taking the no on the playoffs, just take the plus 110 over on DraftKings for under 8.5 wins. Because again, if they only get to 8 wins, they're not making the playoffs anyway. And I'd rather have a plus 110 payout than a minus 195 payout. So that's the way I'm looking at the Raiders numbers here. So let's look at them to win a couple trophies here this year. Let's start with the AFC West. So again, there are 4 teams in the AFC West. Kansas City is the chalk. The Chargers are second. The Denver Broncos are third. Kansas City's like plus 150, plus 175. The Chargers are closer to plus 200. Denver is closer to plus 300. That leaves the Raiders at plus 700. A team projected for over 8.5 wins at plus 700 to win the division. You guys are all going to think I'm nuts here, but I think that number is too high. So I think the Raiders have better than a 14% chance to win this division. If you're talking about them getting to 9 wins, there's only going to be, 5-6 teams in the league that get over 9 or 10 wins here. So if they're in that little group right there, maybe an extra win here, an extra win there, one injury at the wrong time, like maybe Patrick Mahomes misses 2 games and they happen to be right before the Raiders play them or something like that. There are scenarios where I think the Raiders can win this division here. I think this team is better than people are giving them credit for. They were a 10-win team last year. They added Devontae Adams. It didn't really lose anything of substance that we got to worry about with this team. So it's like, I don't know, maybe, yes, the other teams got better too. I mean, Denver added, Russell Wilson, and Kansas City didn't really get better. They lost their number 1 receiver. They lost a bunch of their other receivers as well. They're breaking a whole bunch of new guys in. Yeah, they still have Mahomes. They still have Kelsey, that all right. Yeah, that's fine. But I mean, I don't think there is a 0 chance that the Raiders win this division. I think there's more than the 13% chance that the market is paying for them here as well. So yes, I do think that it's a decent number. If you're going to play any number here for the Raiders to win a trophy, Raiders to win the AFC West at plus 700, I don't think is crazy. FanDuel is where you can get them at plus 700. They're plus 600 to plus 650 on the other books. So you're getting a little bit of a bump on the basis points there. I don't think it's crazy. Plus 700, AFC West, Las Vegas Raiders over on FanDuel. Now, Raiders to win the entire AFC. Do I think the Raiders are going to be the AFC representative in the Super Bowl? No, I do not. So 25-1 on FanDuel is where you can play the Raiders to win the AFC. It's 16-1 to 22-1 on other books. So obviously the 25-1 plus 2,500 on FanDuel, better price if you're interested there. Like I said, I'm not interested. I would need that number to be I don't even know. I'd have to figure it out, but probably closer to the 40 range before I would even get a little bit interested in it there. And that's not the number we're going to get for the AFC. 40 is the number, though, that we get for the Super Bowl. 40-1 on the Raiders to win the Super Bowl, plus 4,000. DraftKings, Sugar House, Bet Rivers, Unibet, FanDuel, Bet MGM. So 6 or 7 books all have it at that plus 4,000 number. 40-1 seems to be the consensus on them to win the Super Bowl. Again, if I need them 40-1 to win the AFC, I'd probably need them 60 or 70-1 to win the Super Bowl before I was interested there. And I just don't think we're anywhere near that number with 40-1. So I'm going to be avoiding betting on them for the trophies. We do have a lot of individual players to talk about here, and I want to break this down because this is a very, very interesting one to break down here. So we'll start with the quarterback like we always do. Derek Carr. Derek Carr, MVP candidate, 30-1 on Caesars is the best price you can get there. He's 28-1 on DraftKings, 25-1 on FanDuel, PointsBet, and BetMGM. So if you want Derek Carr MVP this year, 30-1 over on Caesars is where you can get that number. Let's see. Derek Carr passing yardage, 4,400 yards. I like the over here. FanDuel has it at 4,400 yards, minus 112. So last year, Derek Carr threw for 4,800 yards, and now you're giving him a number one receiver, which you really didn't have last year. You know, you're basically substituting guys like Bryan Edwards and Zay Jones and Henry Ruggs for a couple of weeks there. You're taking those guys out of the equation and replacing them with Devontae Adams. So you now have Devontae Adams. You have a top-tier tight end receiver in Darren Waller. You have a top-tier kind of, slot / underneath guy in Hunter Renfrow, who had 1,000 yards and 100 catches last year, which again, anybody who watches football, 1,000 yards and 100 catches is not easy to do. So hate on Hunter Renfrow all you want, but dude is a baller. He can get open. He knows how to get open. He can play. And again, he had 1,000 yards too. Like, I don't think people realize how good a season Hunter Renfrow had last year. Yes, it's going to get affected, right? But again, a guy that had 100 catches, all right, so maybe you take 20% off of it. It's still 80 catches, 800 yards. That's still pretty damn good numbers that he would, he equates for. Even a guy like Darren Waller, right? Like Darren Waller last year only played 11 games, 55 catches, 665 yards. That's 5 catches for 60 yards per game as an average. You do that over 17 games, you're talking 85 catches and 60 times 17 is over 1,000 yards. So 85 catches and over 1,000 yards was the pace that he was on last year too. Again, take 20% away from that if you want to. You're still looking at like 70 catches and 800 yards for Darren Waller. So again, even with Devontae Adams coming in, I think Adams is going to replace the guys like Ruggs and Edwards and Zay Jones who were, playing that other wide receiver spot here. So yeah, there's a lot to go around here. And now you're putting a guy in there who arguably is going to win more one-on-ones, arguably is going to make some of the catches that some of those other guys did, and has the, ability to be a threat, is going to make teams play everybody a little bit more straight up. So you're not going to be able to double guys like Waller or Renfrow as much. I mean, to me, this just makes the entire offense better. So for Carr to throw for 4,800 yards last year, add Devontae Adams into the mix here. If Carr stays healthy, I think he goes over this 4,400 yards. If you want to play the under on his passing yards, 4,499 at BetMGM. Place to play that. Under is at minus 115. Again, I like the over 4,400 yards on FanDuel at minus 112. I think that's the best way to play him. I love that bet, and I have already put it in to the bet tracker over at FTNBets. Remember, if you guys are looking for some plays here, you can get over to FTNBets.com. Go check out the bet tracker here. It has all of our NFL experts. They put all of their favorite futures bets, all of their favorite team totals, all of their favorite player props. Everything is going to go in there before the season starts. And then once the season starts, for every week of the season, you'll have all those guys going through all those games and putting down the stuff that they're playing. Anytime touchdown scores, receptions, receiving yardage, rushing yardage, passing touchdowns, wherever we find value, we throw it in there. So get over to ftnbets.com and you can check that out there. Little trick for you guys as well. If you don't have an account and you want to sign up to see all the charts and graphs and analysis and everything that's behind the paywall, use promo code Benny, BENNY. It'll save you 20% off on any package. It works over at FTN Fantasy if you're getting ready for your fantasy drafts. Also works over at FTN Daily if you're going to be playing some DraftKings, FanDuel, Prize Pick stuff on a weekly basis, like I know I'm going to be doing this year. I'll have a little bit of stuff over there on FTN Daily as well. I have moved over to the betting side a little more, but again, my background comes from the daily fantasy side of it. So I'm going to be happy to be doing a little more talking, writing, and, media stuff on the FTN daily side, talking a little DraftKings, trying to get back to the king of the beach so I can hang out with my boy Tenacious D down there again. So we'll see how that works out this year. So let's see, what else do we have for David Carr? Oh, as much as I like the David Carr passing yardage over, I don't really love the David Carr touchdown over. So last year he threw 23 touchdowns, right? This year the number is up to 30. It's 29.5. So I get that they're going to bump that number up with Devontae Adams in there, but man, I just think that's too big of a bump. So as much as I like the over on the passing yardage, I'd actually take the under on the passing touchdowns. DraftKings has the under on the passing touchdowns at even money, plus 100. So that's the place to play the under there. If you want to play the over, FanDuel has the over at minus 112 is the lowest price in the market. So you can go and get over 29.5 touchdowns on FanDuel for minus 112, but I prefer the under 29.5 touchdowns for even money, plus 100 over on DraftKings. So now let's talk about some of these wide receivers here. And let's start with the man that we've been talking about a lot already, and that's Davante Adams. I went through the numbers for you guys a little bit, but here's the numbers, right? So Henry Ruggs last year, 24 catches, 469 yards. Bryan Edwards last year, 34 catches, 571 and 3 touchdowns. Zay Jones, 47 catches, 546 yards and 1 touchdown. So between those 3 guys who Davante Adams is going to be taking the snaps of, 105 catches, 1,500 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And that's in addition to the fact that Hunter Renfrow was the number 1 receiver at 103 catches, 1,038 yards, and 9 touchdowns. And that you still had Darren Waller there, who had 55 and 665 in the 11 games that he was active. The reason why I'm going over all these numbers for you is, I keep hearing people say, well, there's not going to be enough to go around in LA. I mean, in Las Vegas, in LV, right? So, okay, well, there's not going to be enough to go around, but let's say you just use Davante Adams as the replacement for the Ruggs, Edwards, and Zay Jones numbers. He would project for 105 catches, 1,500 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I mean, these are the numbers. I'm not making these up. And that would be without Hunter Renfrow losing any of the targets or catches that he had last year. Because again, we didn't take any catches or any production away from guys like Hunter Renfrow or Darren Waller in order to get to these numbers. And that's why I think the overs are pretty viable here for a guy like Davante Adams, because again, we talk about the Cincinnati Bengals a couple days ago, right? And you have all of the pass catchers back for the most part. You got rid of CJ Uzomah, but you brought in Hayden Hurst, who's probably going to maybe not get the exact same number of targets and catches, but is going to pretty closely equate to the production that CJ Uzomah had. So if you're looking at overs for a guy like a Jamar Chase or a guy like a T. Higgins, where are those targets going to come from? There were no vacated targets. There are no guys that had targets that aren't going to be back here this year, for the most part. And when I say I mean like significant amount of targets, right? Like not, oh, well, this guy had 12 targets or that he got to go somewhere. They're probably going to go to some wide receiver 3 or 4, just like those 12 targets did. But when you're talking about guys who were like the wide receiver 2 last year for this team that are now going to be replaced by Davante Adams, again, Zay Jones, Bryan Edwards, Henry Ruggs. And I agree, none of those guys are as good as Davante Adams, but you're only making the case better if you say that all those guys sucked and Davante Adams is good, right? But yet all 3 of those guys who you think suck had 105 catches for 1,500 yards last year. So again, if you're gonna sub Davante Adams into that role, like I said, we're not even having to try to come up with where these extra targets or where these extra catches or where these extra yards are going to come from. It's a pretty simple equation here. So you look at the numbers for Davante Adams. Let's start with Offensive Player of the Year first. 20-1 is the number there, FanDuel and BetMGM. Remember, wide receivers rarely, if ever, are going to win an MVP. If Cooper Kupp didn't do it last year with the wide receiver triple crown, I don't think any wide receiver is going to be. MVP has basically become a quarterback award right now. So what you want to look at for wide receivers and running backs is really Offensive Player of the Year. So Offensive Player of the Year, 20-1 on FanDuel and BetMGM. It's as low as like 15 or 16-1 on some of the other sites there. So 20-1 at FanDuel, BetMGM. If you want to take it, go ahead and be my guest. The number I want to talk about, though, is the receiving yards and the most receiving yards in the league. So Davante Adams was up there towards the top behind guys like Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp for the most receiving yards in the league. But I think if you look at those numbers that we talked about with those guys that are leaving, there's a chance he could get 1,500 plus yards. Now, again, if Cooper Kupp goes nuts and gets like 1,900 again, all right, well, whatever. You're probably not going to catch him there. But I don't think it's crazy to assume that Davante Adams could average close to 80, 90 yards a game this year and finish with 1,500 or 1,600 yards, which would put him at least in the conversation for the most receiving yards. PointsBet has the best number on most receiving yards, Davante Adams, at 15-1. It's as low as 11-1 on some of the other sports books that we work with. 11-1 to 14-1 is kind of the consensus range there. So to get it at 15-1 on PointsBet, I think is a pretty good value. I don't hate if you want to sprinkle a little money on most receiving yards in the league for Davante Adams. I like that more than most receptions, and I like it more than most receiving touchdowns as well. The yardage, I love the over on the yardage here. I mean, we talked about how 1,500 yards is not a crazy projection to put up for Davante Adams this year. 1,200 yards is all they're asking for on FanDuel for the over. So again, I'm not saying 1,200 yards is a cakewalk, easy thing for anybody to do, but I do think Davante Adams projects to do better than that and has done better than that in his career. So I like the over on FanDuel, 1,200 yards, minus 112 is the over on FanDuel. So I like that one as well. One of my favorite Raiders bets for us to make here. If you want to play the under, MGM has it up a little higher, 1,224 yards, 24.5 yards, actually. You can play the under on it at minus 115. Like I said, though, I'm projecting him for over 1,500 here, which means even if he misses 2 or 3 games this season, I can still get him over 1,200 there. So that's the kind of guy that I like. I like the Davante Adams over on his receiving yardage here. Forget about the under, but if you want it, you can play the over at FanDuel, the under at MGM. Best place to play them. Most receptions, 10-1 for Davante Adams. And this is why I like the most receiving yards better than most receptions. We're getting 15-1 on most receiving yards. We're only getting 10-1 on most receptions. It's 8.5-1 on MGM. It's 9-1 on DraftKings. FanDuel at 10-1 has the best price on it there. The number that's being offered for receptions for him is 99.5. DraftKings and MGM has it there. Minus 115 to the over, minus 115 to the under. You know, I did the numbers for you guys. 105 vacated targets from those 3 wide receivers for 1,500 plus yards here. It's very close to the number that we would have him projected as. So I don't really think there's value here. I'd rather play the yardage number that we talked about than the receptions. Same thing with the touchdowns here. Most receiving touchdowns, 9-1. It's as low as 7.5-1 on DraftKings. I'd rather play the receiving yards than mess with receptions or receiving touchdowns here. FanDuel, MGM, Sugar House, Bet Rivers, Unibet all have it at 9-1 if you guys want to play most receiving touchdowns for Davante Adams. Like I said, I'm staying away from it. The yardage is the one I'm attacking. 9.5 touchdowns is the number for him. You could play an over on that, minus 118 on FanDuel. 10.5 is the highest number in the market. You can play the under on DraftKings or BetMGM. It's at minus 130 on both of those. I do lean to the under here, but I don't really want to play this number. I think 9.5, 10, it's a good number. I think it's a little high, but I don't think it's an unreasonable number for him. And again, if things go really well, he can end up with 12 to 14. So I would shade the under if I had to pick anything here. DraftKings, MGM, minus 130, under 10.5, which is higher than a 9.5 on FanDuel. If you do want to play the over, go to FanDuel. The number is 9.5 instead of 10.5. This way you get a little bit lower number, a little bit better chance to cash that. So now let's talk about some of the other pass catchers from last year and kind of take a look at where their numbers are at. Like I said, Darren Waller, 11 games last year, 55 catches, 665 yards, averaged 5 catches for 60 yards per game in the games that he did play. Put that out over a 17-game season, you're looking at 85 catches for over 1,000 yards there. Now, again, this is without Davante Adams, so maybe you take 10 or 20% of the targets away from him. So you'd be looking at somewhere like, let's say 15% of the targets that you take away from him. You'd be looking at about 72 or 73 catches, and you'd be looking at about 850 to 880 yards, somewhere in there. And that's why I don't like any of the Darren Waller props. Because again, I just said, if you take that 10 to 20% to 15% away, you get about 73 catches. The reception number for Darren Waller, 72.5. BetMGM has it over under minus 115. So if my numbers are around 73, the number 72.5, there's really no edge there. I'm not going to be touching that one. If anything, I'd play the under just in case the guy does get injured there. It's probably more likely. Remember, 2/3 of these season-long props do go to the under. So you really have to love an over to play it. And if you don't love an over, then under is probably the way you should be going with it, which is why I would say the under here on Darren Waller is probably better. Same thing with the receiving yards. 825 is the low on FanDuel, minus 112. 899 is the high on BetMGM at minus 115. I said basically my number would be somewhere in that 850 range, maybe a little bit higher. So again, not a big enough of an edge to take the over on FanDuel at 825. and not a big enough edge to the downside to take the under on BetMGM at 899. So just kind of avoiding it altogether, but I did want to let you guys know where the Waller props are sitting. Hunter Renfrow, 103 catches Hunter Renfrow had last year, 1,038 yards and 9 touchdowns. I think the touchdown regression is very, very likely to happen. But I also think the catch and the yardage regression is going to come. And again, it's not a knock on Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow did more than he probably should have last year because they really had a gaping hole, and he was the guy that came in and filled it, especially after Darren, the games that Darren Waller was out. When Waller was out, basically that meant that Renfrow was the guy underneath, and that probably gave him some more of those catches than he deserved. And then having Devontae Adams come in this year. So again, I'm looking at like a 20% reduction for Hunter Renfrow. But again, a 20% reduction for Renfrow is still about 78, 80 catches with about 800-ish yards and, 4 or 5 touchdowns. Not a bad season whatsoever. So keep that in mind when you're doing your season-long fantasy drafts. And Hunter Renfrow, even with Devontae Adams in town, is still a pretty viable guy to look at here. So the number out there in the market for his catches, 76.5 on MGM. So, that's interesting. 77.5 on DraftKings, and the over is plus 110. If you're going to play an under here, the under on DraftKings is minus 140. So even though the under is 77.5 catches versus 76, I'd still rather play the under on MGM at 76.5 minus 115. Yes, we're getting one less catch on our side here, but you're getting a much better payout to go from minus 140 to minus 115. If you want to play the over, DraftKings has that over at plus 110. MGM has the over at 76.5 at minus 115. The DraftKings plus 110 is up at 77.5. Those two numbers are basically the same, but I would rather take the over on DraftKings at plus 110. It's a slightly better number, even though you do need one extra catch over there. Again, I think Renfrow and Waller are going to have decent seasons. I think that their ceiling season is probably out of the equation with Devontae Adams there, but I don't think that either one of them is going to suck. People projecting these guys for 50, 60 catches, unless one of them gets hurt, I think that's way too low there. But I do think the number for them in that 70s for catches is probably around where they end up here. So I don't really think either one of them is a good bet. So that brings us to the last guy we're going to talk about here with the Las Vegas Raiders, and that's going to be running back Josh Jacobs. So Josh Jacobs last year had about 60% of the carries for this team. Nobody else really had a lot. There was a bunch of guys with like 50, 60, 70, like 3 or 4 of those guys in there. But for the most part, his 217 carries dwarfed what anybody else on this team did. Now, they did bring in a couple rookies. People were talking about them. People are a little worried about Josh Jacobs. I mean, do I think Josh Jacobs is going to get back to the 300-plus touch guy he was I think it was his rookie year when he put up those really, really good numbers? No, he probably overperformed on that. But this is a proven guy who can get you, 50, 60 yards a game rushing, add in another 15 to 20 receiving on 2 or 3 catches. I mean, that puts you right around like 10 fantasy points right there. It puts you, right around getting somewhere around like 800 yards rushing, 900 yards rushing, and, another, maybe 200 or 300 receiving on 25 to 40 catches or so. Like, those are solid numbers. The problem with it is, we got to look at what the numbers being offered in the market are. So again, DK has his rushing yards at 750. The over on that, or I'm sorry, BetMGM has it at 749.5. The over is minus 115. DraftKings has it at 750.5. The under is minus 115. So again, it's only 1 yard, but if you're going to play an over at the same price, play the over on BetMGM at 749. Play the under on DraftKings at 750 there. I actually think the over is the better way that you can lean here. Because again, he had 872 yards last year. We've seen him have, more yards than that before. So this is obviously a guy who has a proven track record in the NFL. It's about 125, 130 yards above what he did last year, is above what the projection is for him this year, or not the projection, is above what the, prop number is out there in the market for him. So I don't hate the over 749 rushing yards on BetMGM for Josh Jacobs. Do I want to rush out and put my entire mortgage on it? No, but I do think it's worth a little bit of a wager here. Again, MGM, the place to play that over Josh Jacobs rushing yards. 7.5 touchdowns is the number of touchdowns that we have for Josh Jacobs here. I think that's a good number. I don't have a lean to the over or the under really. I had it, I think, at 7. So 7.5. I mean, I guess my lean would be under, but it's right in line with it. It's minus 115. So we're getting it, even juiced up a little bit there. Not a bet that I'd be willing to take, although it is minus 115 to the over and the under on both DraftKings and MGM if you are interested. So there you go. That's going to wrap it up for the Las Vegas Raiders team betting preview here for 2022. Remember, you can get over to FTN Bets, FTN Fantasy, or FTN Daily right now. Use that promo code Benny, BENNY. Put that in the promo code section. Saves you 20% off any package on any one of those sites that you guys are trying to get in. If you're playing that season-long stuff, you got some drafts coming up, you want to be on FTN Fantasy, DraftKings, FanDuel, Prize Picks, all that stuff for in season, you want to be on FTN Daily. And then obviously FTN Bets, we got preseason bets going up right now. We have futures bets going up right now. And once the game starts, we're going to have a ton of betting action every day of the week. And we also have the MLB action. It gets you the MMA action. It gets you the tennis action with our tennis expert, Josh Gross, who has been absolutely crushing the tennis betting scene over the last 2 years over here at FTN Bets. So a lot of stuff going on right now. It's a busy time of year. Good luck to everybody that is going on vacation. Good luck to everybody that's sending their kids back to school. I still got mine home for a couple of weeks. Can't wait to get rid of them. I love those guys, but at the same point in time, I need a little bit of a break here as well. So for Benny Ricciardi signing off for our sponsor, Sleeper, here on the FTN Betscast. Good luck, everybody.
Live from the new sports betting capital of the world.
You might be from Texas, but I'm from New Jersey.